So Mitch McConnell's been in the news for reasons, and this spotlight on the senator's failing health has called for a renewed interest in his retirement. I've noticed over the past few years Republicans having issues with Mitch McConnell and wanting him to retire. I don't think that most of that ends up being fair. I do think the more recent criticisms of his is fair, but I don't necessarily think that the policy issues that people tend to get upset over were justified. I think in general, Mitch McConnell has received more hate than has been justified considering his record. And so today I hope to be able to outline why I think Mitch McConnell is not so bad. I mean, he probably should still retire. His health is rapidly failing, but we should remember him a little bit more fondly than we like to. So we'll begin by starting in 1967. In 1967, he enlisted in the U.S. Army Reserves, and he was a part of the U.S. Army Reserves for only a couple of months. He was honorably discharged due to developing optic neuritis. After his discharge until about 1974, he worked on a number of Republican campaigns, demonstrating his loyalty to party causes. And in 1974, he would go to work for the Ford administration. In 1977, he would achieve the highest elected position in Jefferson County, Kentucky, that being the county executive slash judge. And there he would actually remain until he became a senator in literally 1984. During his time in the Senate, he worked specifically to get Republicans elected, and then he moved on to being the Senate whip for Republicans, working to maintain party discipline. And then more recently, he's been the Republican Senate leader for quite a while, since 2007 to be exact. His political opponents, that being Democrats, have generally portrayed him as being an obstructionist, opposing their legislation for seemingly arbitrary reasons and perhaps even unfairly. Like any good senator, he's had both some wins and some losses. One of his better wins was in 2015 with the Protecting Our Infants Act. This act compelled the Department of Health and Human Services to conduct research into prenatal opioid use addictions, where if the mother ends up taking opioids while she is pregnant, that causes the child to be born addicted to opioids, which isn't particularly good. Being born addicted to a drug is never a good thing. It also allowed the Department of Health and Human Services to disseminate the information that they discovered to individual states. That way, the states could end up doing what they needed to do. I believe this passage of legislation was good on multiple fronts. On the one hand, it provided ways of helping newborns get out of a bad situation. On the other hand, it also respected federalism. The federal government did not come in and heavy handedly do something about the issue. Instead, it provided to the states a way to solve the issue and gave them information. Now, I mentioned that Mitch McConnell had some losses. In 2012, he comically ended up filibustering his own measure. So, 2012 is an election year, as you may remember, and Obama wanted to increase the executive's power over the debt limit, which was an issue then, as it is now, and as it probably will forevermore be. Now, Obama asked his Treasury Department if he had unilateral power over the debt ceiling. He did not, and so Mitch McConnell wanted to show some weakness in the Democrat Party, and so he put forward a measure that would grant the executive power over the debt ceiling as opposed to Congress where it is. Now, Mitch McConnell, I think, was expecting Democrats to maintain some degree of political responsibility, recognizing that Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution explicitly gives power over debts to Congress. But he misplayed, and Democrats were more than willing to be politically irresponsible. And so they were all ready and willing to vote on this measure that McConnell had put forward. Now, McConnell didn't actually want this measure to go forward, so he comically filibustered his own measure in 2012. Now, I do want to say, had this ploy worked, it would have been a Promethean example of politicking and would be something we talk about for generations beyond. Because it didn't work, though, it is just a humorous side note in McConnell's history. The most important thing that Mitch McConnell has done, though, was blocking the confirmation of Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court. Now, Republicans have plenty of reasons to dislike Merrick Garland, but I want to go over a few just to remind you how terrible this guy is. As Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland failed to enforce a law prohibiting protests in front of Supreme Court justices' houses. You may also be aware of the Hunter Biden scandal, where David Weiss gave a sweetheart deal to Hunter Biden. And when people said, hey, that's a problem, you can't do that, Merrick Garland appointed the guy to have special counsel status so he couldn't be fired. This was seemingly supposed to be a way to prevent corruption, but to anyone actually looking at it, the guy did the corrupt thing before he was given the immunity to do corruption. I'm not entirely sure what was going on with this aside from the fact that it's just bald-facedly corruption. Perhaps most egregiously is when Merrick Garland, with the force of the Department of Justice, compared parents who were concerned about their children being taught inappropriate things at school to those people who did a thing, the terrorists who flew planes into the Twin Towers on 9/11. I hope I've reminded you how terrible Merrick Garland is and that it's actually a very, very good thing that Mitch McConnell blocked his confirmation to the Supreme Court. McConnell's failing health signals a time in which he should retire. Republicans should focus less on the petty disagreements they may have with Mitch McConnell and instead focus on the substantive good that he did that we can all agree on.